There have been studies that have looked at the abuse liability of oxycodone, hydrocodone, morphine, and even hydromorphone. So if you take a look at the slide that we'll pull up, there's 3 studies on this slide. One is by Whiteman and colleagues, and that one looked at the abuse liability of commonly prescribed opioids. That's the first bullet point. It looks at hydrocodone 20/1000 versus the 40 milligrams of morphine. Now, interestingly, all of these studies show that you really cannot determine abuse liability by the equianalgesic dosing of these drugs. And the proof of the pudding is that milligram for milligram, hydrocodone and morphine are really deemed to be identical. So if that's true, then 20 milligrams of hydrocodone is half the amount of 40 milligrams of morphine, yet the studies for abuse liability showed that they were identical. Interestingly, what you don't see on that slide is there was a study about 10 years earlier that looked at the same exact thing, but instead of looking at hydrocodone and acetaminophen combination, they looked at hydrocodone and the anticholinergic products that are used for cough and cold, and they showed the exact same thing in terms of the milligram amount of hydrocodone, that 20 milligrams of hydrocodone was equivalent to 40 milligrams of morphine in terms of abuse liability. Then there was another study that said that hydrocodone 45 milligrams was equivalent to oxycodone 40 milligrams, and that was by Walsh and colleagues. And what they determined is that scheduling of a drug cannot determine the abuse liability. So that follows an abuse liability really should not really determine the scheduling of the drug. And then the third study by Wilsley and colleagues, that basically is what it is. They said that 30 milligrams of hydrocodone was equivalent of 15 milligrams of morphine sustained release, which is even more interesting because 15 milligrams of extended release morphine, we're talking about taking 15 milligrams and extend it over 12 hours. When you compare that to hydrocodone, twice the amount of hydrocodone in a short period of time, that shows that hydrocodone is actually worse than morphine. So we've got all these studies showing us different issues, but none of these studies have really clearly told us one way or another whether hydrocodone is more or less abusable than oxycodone, for example, or even morphine. So again, I think the upshot of this is that we really have no data. If anything, we have conflicting data.